before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from right now? It's crazy how one story can cross oceans and still touch hearts the same way. Drop your country below. Let's see how far kindness can still reach tonight. The Metro D blinked, unsure whether to intervene. The man, Michael Sterling, one of the city's most feared billionaires, stared at the girl as if the air had vanished. His spoon clattered against the plate, a sharp sound that drew every gaze. "What did you say?" he managed, voice tight. The girl, barely 16, clutched the strap of her bag. "Dad," she repeated, softer now, as if saying it louder might make it less true. Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief and hope. You don't remember me." Michael straightened slowly, eyes darting to his companion, a poised woman in pearls, then back to the trembling stranger before him. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Security." But before anyone could move, the girl's knees buckled. She hit the marble floor hard, the echo of pain mixing with gasps from nearby tables. A waiter rushed forward, but she raised a shaky hand. "Please," she murmured. "I just wanted to see him once." Michael's chest tightened, a flicker of something, guilt, confusion, surfacing in his cold eyes. The woman beside him leaned close. "Michael, she's probably a scammer. Don't create a scene." He wanted to believe that. He wanted this to be simple, another desperate soul trying to exploit a name. But when she lifted her face again, he saw her eyes. Hazel, the same shade his late wife once had. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. The staff helped the girl to her feet, and Michael found himself whispering, "Who are you?" She smiled faintly, tears mixing with rain. "Someone you left behind." A murmur rippled across the restaurant. Phones recorded. Whispers grew. And Michael, the man who prided himself on never losing composure, felt the ground shift beneath his polished shoes. Outside, thunder rolled. The girl turned toward the door, her voice faint. "Sorry for disturbing your dinner." She stepped into the rain again, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against Michael's ribs. He could have let her go. Should have. But something inside him, buried for years beneath money and meetings, stirred painfully awake. "Wait," he said, rising abruptly. The entire restaurant turned. He moved past the stunned diners, past the Metro D, into the storm. Rain plastered his hair as he scanned the street, until he saw her, sitting on the curb, hugging her knees, her thin sweater soaked through. He approached slowly. "You can't just call me that and walk away," he said, trying to sound calm. She looked up, eyes red. "Then tell me I'm wrong," she whispered. Michael hesitated. "What's your name?" "Lila." The name hit him like a ghost from a forgotten dream. He remembered the adoption forms his wife once filled out, forms he never signed. His throat burned. "Get in the car," he said finally. "You'll get sick." "I already am," she muttered. He frowned but helped her up, noticing the bruises on her wrists. She flinched at his touch, a small, involuntary motion that hurt more than the rain. Inside the car, silence stretched. The driver glanced in the mirror, waiting for direction. Michael finally said, "Take us home." Lila turned to him, confusion mixing with disbelief. "Home." He looked out the window, voice low. "We'll figure out the truth." But as the city lights reflected off her wet cheeks, he already knew. Truth wasn't what scared him. It was the past catching up, wearing the face of a girl who still believed he could be her father. The car glided through the slick streets, rain blurring everything beyond the glass, lights, people, even the truth Michael was trying not to face. Inside, silence grew heavy, broken only by the hum of tires and the occasional sniffle from Lila. She pressed her forehead to the window, watching her reflection flicker between shadows and streetlights. Michael stole glances when she wasn't looking. Her clothes were threadbare, her hands shaking, and yet there was a quiet dignity about her, something that didn't fit the picture of a liar. He cleared his throat. "Where's your mother?" "She died," Lila said softly. 2 years ago. Cancer." His fingers tightened around the armrest. "I'm sorry." She gave a faint smile. "Don't be. She said she forgave you." That single line pierced deeper than she could have known. Michael looked away, jaw tightening. "Forgave me for what?" Lila didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "You really don't remember me, do you?" He didn't. But a fragment of a memory, a crying infant, a hospital room, his wife's trembling voice, haunted him suddenly. He had buried that part of his life, sealed it beneath ambition and regret. The car stopped in front of a massive iron gate. His mansion stood beyond, tall, silent, glowing faintly through the mist. As the driver opened the door, Lila hesitated. "Are you sure I should come in?" Michael nodded. "You've come this far. You deserve answers." They stepped into the marble foyer. A maid appeared, startled by Lila's soaked figure. "Sir, should I?" "Get her a towel and something warm to eat," Michael said curtly. As the maid hurried off, Lila's eyes wandered over the grand staircase, chandeliers, the paintings on the walls. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Nothing like the stories Mom told me." He frowned. "What stories?" "That you used to be kind. That you once built a playground in the neighborhood because a boy broke his leg and couldn't play on the old one." Michael blinked. "That memory was real, decades old. She told you that." "She said the man who built it was the kind of person who could love a child who wasn't his." The words hit like thunder. He looked at her closely now. The freckles, the curve of her smile, and something deep inside whispered, this wasn't a mistake. The maid returned with a blanket and soup. Lila thanked her politely before sitting on the couch. Michael watched her eat in small, careful bites, like someone used to rationing every meal. "Where have you been living?" he asked quietly. "Shelter. Sometimes with friends." "And your schooling?" She shrugged. "Dropped out last year. I had to work. Mom's medicine wasn't cheap." He closed his eyes, shame creeping through him like cold water. For years he'd written checks to charity, given speeches about giving back, all while a girl who might have been his daughter starved in the same city. When Lila finished her soup, she looked up. "You still think I'm lying?" Michael hesitated. "I don't know what to think." "Then don't think," she said softly. "Just listen." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a faded photograph, a woman holding a baby, smiling weakly at the camera. Behind her, in the corner of the frame, was a man walking out the hospital door. Michael. The room spun. He took the photo with trembling fingers. "This can't be." "She said you left because you thought you couldn't be a father," Lila whispered. "But she never stopped believing you'd come back one day." His throat tightened. "What was her name?" "Grace." And with that name, the last piece fell into place. Grace. The nurse he'd fallen in love with when his world was collapsing. The woman he'd left behind when business consumed him. He sank into a chair, staring at the floor. She deserved better. "She didn't want better," Lila said. "She just wanted you." Tears he hadn't shed in years stung his eyes. He turned away, gripping the armrest until his knuckles whitened. Lila stood quietly. "You're not the man she remembered," she said gently. "But maybe you could still become him." Outside, the storm softened to a drizzle. Inside, something began to shift. Fragile, uncertain, but real. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. Michael looked up slowly. "You said she forgave me. Did she ever tell you why?" Lila nodded. "Because she said you were scared. And scared people don't need punishment. They need healing." He swallowed hard. "And you? Do you forgive me?" She looked at him, the man who'd walked away from everything, and said quietly, "I don't know yet, but I came here hoping I could." Michael's chest ached to the honesty in her voice. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He just felt like a man who'd lost too much. "Then stay," he whispered, "at least until we figure this out." Lila hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." As she walked up the stairs to the guest room, Michael remained seated, staring at the rain tracing the windows. In his reflection, he didn't see the cold businessman anymore. He saw a frightened man being given one last chance. And though he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, one truth pressed against his heart like a prayer. Maybe forgiveness starts with staying. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. The kind of silence that carries ghosts. Michael sat alone in his study, the photo still trembling between his fingers. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in his chest. He turned the picture over. On the back, Grace's handwriting bled faintly through the years. For Michael, so you never forget the day your heart could have changed. He pressed the photo against his lips. Grace, he whispered. The name tasted like regret. Upstairs, the faint creak of a floorboard reminded him he wasn't alone anymore. He stood, walked to the staircase, and looked up. Lila was sitting on the steps in one of the house robes, her damp hair tied loosely, her eyes soft but heavy with caution. Couldn't sleep? He asked quietly. She shook her head. The bed's too soft. I'm not used to it. He almost smiled, the kind of broken smile that hides years of guilt. That's not something I hear often around here. Lila tilted her head. You live here alone? Mostly. He hesitated. My wife passed away years ago. No kids. Just work. She hugged her knees. That sounds lonely. He nodded. It is. They sat in silence for a while. The only sound was the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Finally, Lila said, she used to tell me stories about you, how you bring her flowers, how you used to fix broken toy for the hospital kids. I didn't believe her. Not until tonight. He looked at her sharply. Why tonight? Because when I said, Dad, she said softly, you didn't walk away. The words cracked something inside him, something rusted but still alive. Lila, he said slowly, I need to know everything. From the beginning. And so she told him. About the small apartment with peeling walls. About her mother working double shifts to afford medicine. About the night she'd hold her mom's hand while pretending not to cry. About the letter Grace wrote, one she'd never sent, begging Michael to come see their daughter before the end. Lila's voice broke when she said, she died with that letter in her hand. I found it after the funeral. That's when I decided to find you. Michael felt the air drain from his lungs. Do you still have it? She nodded and handed him a worn envelope from her backpack. His name was written in faded ink, trembling letters still holding warmth. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning each word. Grace's voice came alive between the lines, forgiving, gentle, and heartbreakingly kind. If you ever see her, don't turn away. She's more like you than you think. Maybe she'll remind you of the man you wanted to be. When he finished reading, his vision blurred. He didn't bother hiding the tears. Lila watched quietly, her own eyes glistening. I failed you both, he whispered. No, she said. You still have a chance. He looked up, meeting her gaze, those same hazel eyes that once belonged to the woman he loved. Why are you being so kind to me? Because she taught me not to hate, Lila said simply. She said hate is just love that got lost. Michael swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. He reached out, hesitated, then gently placed his hand over hers. Thank you, he said. They sat like that for a long moment, two broken souls piecing together something fragile but real. Outside, the night lightened toward dawn. A thin beam of gold peeked through the curtains, washing over them like quiet forgiveness. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. The next morning smelled like rain and redemption. Lila woke up to sunlight cutting through white curtains. For the first time in months, she didn't wake up afraid. Downstairs, Michael was already dressed, pacing the living room with a cup of coffee in hand. When she appeared, he stopped. You're awake, he said. Good. She smiled faintly. Didn't expect breakfast in a place like this. He nodded toward the table. Pancakes, fruit, and a glass of milk waited for her, an awkward but sincere attempt at care. You made this, she asked, surprised. I tried, he admitted. Haven't cooked since Grace. Lila sat down, touched by the effort. She took a bite, then grinned. It's terrible. Michael laughed for the first time in years, a genuine, unguarded laugh that softened the lines around his face. Guess I'm rusty. They ate in silence for a while until Lila asked, What happens now? He hesitated. That depends. I can help you finish school. Give you a home. If you'll let me. She looked down at her plate. You don't have to do that just because you feel guilty. It's not guilt, he said firmly. It's something else. What? Hope. The word lingered between them like sunlight on glass, fragile, glowing, and new. Days passed slowly, filled with an odd mix of comfort and caution. The mansion, once a monument to solitude, now hummed with faint traces of life. The soft patter of Lila's footsteps, the clink of dishes she insisted on washing, the low hum of music she played from her old phone. Michael watched from afar most days, letting her explore, letting her breathe. But at night, when the house went quiet again, he found himself lingering outside her door, listening, making sure she slept peacefully. It was the first time in years he cared whether someone else in the house was okay. Lila, meanwhile, was fighting her own quiet battle. Every corner of the mansion reminded her of the life she never had, a father she didn't know, a childhood of safety she never felt. Sometimes she'd wander into the study, staring at framed photos of Michael standing beside politicians, business tycoons, and global awards. So much power, and yet so much emptiness. One afternoon, she found an old piano in the sitting room. She brushed away the dust and pressed a key. It rang out, lonely and beautiful. Slowly, she began to play a tune she remembered her mother humming. Michael entered quietly, leaning on the doorway. The melody hit him like déjà vu. Grace used to play that, he said softly. Lila turned, startled. She taught me. He smiled faintly, coming closer. I haven't heard it in years. They stood side by side, a man rediscovering sound, a girl rediscovering belonging. After a while, Lila whispered. She said music was how she talked to you when words failed. Michael's eyes glistened. Then I've been deaf for too long. They laughed quietly, the tension between them fading. But when she saw his hands shaking, she frowned. Are you okay? Just tired. He lied. He wasn't tired. He was terrified. Terrified that this fragile piece could break if she ever learned everything. There was more to his absence than fear. There was betrayal, and he wasn't ready for her to know it yet. That evening, Lila sat on the balcony, sketching in her notebook, something she'd loved since childhood. Michael joined her, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. You draw? He asked. She nodded. Mom said I got it from you. He chuckled softly. I can barely draw a straight line. Then maybe I got it from who you used to be, she teased. He smiled, touched by a quiet humor. What are you sketching? She turned the page toward him. It was a portrait of a man and a little girl walking under an umbrella, the man's face unfinished. That's us, she said shyly. But I don't know what your smile looks like yet. Michael looked at the sketch for a long time. Maybe one day you will. The wind rustled gently through the curtains, carrying something almost like peace. For a brief moment, they were just father and daughter, no past, no lies, just a chance. Then the phone on Michael's desk rang. He frowned, excused himself, and stepped inside. It was Robert, his lawyer and oldest friend. You disappeared again. Mike, the board's furious. Investors are pulling out. Let them, Michael interrupted coldly. I've got more important things to handle. More important than the company you built. Michael looked toward the balcony, where Lila sat laughing at something the maid said. His voice softened. Yes. Robert sighed. You sound like Grace again. The name froze him. What do you mean? I mean, Robert said carefully, you sound like a man who left her behind when the truth came out. Michael's chest tightened. Don't. You can't hide it forever, Michael, Robert warned. She'll find out. Michael ended the call abruptly. His reflection stared back from the dark window, haunted, cornered. The truth, the thing he'd buried for 16 years. The real reason he walked away. Grace hadn't just been sick. She'd been betrayed. By him. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight. That night, as Lila slept peacefully in the guest room, Michael poured himself a drink he wouldn't touch. The ice melted slowly, like time catching up. He opened his safe, reached past old contracts and jewels, and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were 2 documents, One was Lila's birth certificate. The other, a letter with a paternity test he'd ordered years ago. He stared at the bold letters, not the biological father. His hands trembled. Grace had never lied to him. Not once. But back then, fear had twisted his trust. The test came from a rumor, a whisper planted by a jealous rival. Instead of asking her, he'd left. Now, looking at Lila's face in a framed photo he'd taken that morning, he felt the crushing weight of his sin. It didn't matter what the papers said anymore. She had called him Dad, and for the first time, it had felt right. Still, how would she see him once she knew? He folded the paper slowly, his reflection wavering in the window. The wind outside howled like a voice whispering her name, and his silence. He closed the safe, whispered into the dark, "Grace, I'm sorry." But the ghost didn't forgive easily. Morning came quietly, carrying with it a faint smell of coffee and jasmine from the garden. Lila wandered downstairs, her hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. Michael sat by the dining table, pretending to read the newspaper, though his gaze hadn't touched a word. The envelope from the safe lay hidden in the drawer beside him, heavy as a confession. "Good morning," Lila said softly, her voice still rough from sleep. He smiled faintly. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better," she said, pouring herself juice. "It feels safe here." That word, safe, hit him deeper than it should have. He nodded, his throat tight. "I'm glad." They ate breakfast quietly until Lila looked up and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "If Mom was still alive, do you think you'd have come back?" Michael froze. His hand trembled around his cup. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe not soon enough." Lila's gaze softened, as if she saw the weight behind his honesty. "At least you're here now." He nodded, trying to smile. But his mind was a storm. He wanted to tell her everything, about the letter, the test, the guilt that ate at him, but fear kept him quiet. She'd already lost one parent to pain. He couldn't bear to be the reason she lost faith again. Later that day, he took her into the city. She hadn't been anywhere in weeks, and the brightness of downtown made her grin like a child. They stopped at a bookshop cafe, and she pressed her nose against the glass of the pastry case. "Get what you want," he said, amused. Her eyes widened. "Anything. Anything." She chose a chocolate croissant and sat by the window. For a few minutes, everything felt ordinary. Laughter, crumbs, sunlight on the table. She looked happy. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" she asked suddenly. "To when?" "Before everything went wrong." He thought about Grace, about the night he walked away. Every day. She smiled sadly. "Me too." They sat in silence for a while, the city humming around them. Then Lila pulled out a folded paper from a bag, a sketch she'd been working on. "I finished it," she said shyly, handing it to him. He unfolded it and saw the same umbrella scene. But this time, both faces were complete. His face was smiling. "I finally figured it out," she said quietly. "You smile like someone who's trying to believe he deserves to." He couldn't speak. His chest swelled, the ache almost unbearable. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's us," she said. "How it should have been." Tears threatened his composure. He cleared his throat and said, "Lila, there's something you should know." Before he could finish, his phone rang. The screen flashed Robert's name. Reluctantly, he answered. "Mike, listen. I did some digging into that old test," Robert said quickly. "The lab that handled it, it was shut down years ago. Fraud cases. None of their results were legitimate." Michael froze. "You're saying?" "I'm saying that test was likely fake. You might have left for nothing." Michael's heart stopped. He turned toward Lila, who was smiling at something outside the window. So pure, so unaware, his voice cracked. "Thank you, Robert." When the call ended, he just sat there, staring at her. The girl he had once doubted, the woman he had once left. Both had carried pain he'd caused with his own fear. He took a deep breath, stood, and said softly, "Lila, let's go somewhere." She blinked. "Where?" "To see someone," he said. "Someone who deserves to know the truth." They drove through narrow streets until they reached the old cemetery at the edge of town. Lila's expression changed the moment she saw the gates. "Mom's here," she whispered. He nodded. "I know." They walked in silence until they reached Grace's grave. The grass was overgrown. The stone cracked slightly at the base. Lila knelt, brushing off the leaves. "I haven't been here in months," she said softly. "Couldn't afford the bus." Michael crouched beside her. "I should have been here years ago." He reached into his pocket and placed the old photo, the one of Grace and the baby, beside the headstone. Then he whispered, "I found her, Grace. She's everything you said she'd be." Lila looked at him, her lips trembling. "You miss her too?" "Every day," he said, voice breaking. She leaned against him quietly, and for the first time, Michael let the tears fall freely. Rain began to drizzle again, light and cold, as if the sky itself mourned with them. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. As they stood there, Lila reached into a bag and pulled out something small, a necklace with a tiny pendant. She held it out to him. "Mom wanted you to have this." He looked down. Inside the pendant was a tiny photo of Grace holding a baby. She kept this all those years. She said love doesn't expire, only people do. Michael's hand shook as he closed the pendant around his fingers. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," Lila said softly, but she believed you could become someone who does. He looked at her, the rain tracing silver lines down both their faces. "Then I'll try," he whispered. "For her. For you." And for the first time since Grace's death, the guilt didn't feel eternal. It just felt human. They stood together under the rain, two halves of a broken past slowly mending into something like a family. That night, the rain followed them home, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt cleansing, like something sacred washing away what neither of them had been able to say. When they stepped inside, Lila headed straight to her room, saying softly, "Good night, Dad." It was the first time she had called him that without hesitation. The word echoed through the empty hall, wrapping around Michael's heart-like warmth after a lifetime of frost. He stood there long after she disappeared upstairs, whispering back to no one, "Good night, my girl." But sleep didn't come easily. Memories swarmed his mind. Grace's laughter, the way she used to hum while washing dishes, the way she tilted her head when she forgave him before he even asked. He sat in his study, staring at the pendant Lila had given him. Inside, Grace's photo seemed to smile through time, as if she knew this moment would come. "You were right," he murmured. "She's stronger than both of us." A soft knot pulled him from his thoughts. Lila stood there, wearing one of his old shirts that hung loose on her small frame. "Can't sleep," she said, sheepish. He nodded. "Me neither." She walked in and sat across from him. "I keep thinking about her. About how much she'd laugh if she saw us right now." He smiled. "She'd say I finally learned to listen." Lila grinned. "And she'd say I talk too much." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that carried tears just beneath it. After a moment, Lila's tone softened. "You know, Mom never said anything bad about you. Not once." Michael looked surprised. "Even after I left." "She said people do the wrong thing for the right reasons sometimes, and she hoped you'd find yours." He exhaled shakily. "She always saw good in people, even when they didn't deserve it." Lila's eyes shimmered. "She saw it in you." That silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was healing. After a while, Michael leaned back, staring out the window where the rain tapped like a lullaby. "Lila, there's something I've been afraid to tell you." Her expression turned cautious. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Years ago, when Grace got pregnant, someone told me she'd been unfaithful. They showed me a test, said you weren't mine." Lila froze. "I believed them," he confessed. "I didn't ask her. I just left. That's the truth." The words hung between them like thunder. Lila's breath hitched. "You thought I wasn't your daughter." "I was wrong," he said quickly. "The test? It was fake. I just found out. But I can't undo what I did." Her eyes filled with tears, voice trembling. "You left because of a rumor." Michael's hand shook. "I was scared. I'd just lost everything in business." I didn't think I could handle another heartbreak. And instead, I caused one. Lila stood abruptly, pacing the room. Do you know what that did to her? To me? He looked down, guilt carving deep lines into his face. Every day since then, I've known. She died waiting for you, Michael. Her voice cracked on his name. No longer Dad. Not in this moment. She used to sit by the window every night, saying maybe tomorrow you'd walk in. And you never did. Michael's chest caved under the weight of her words. He whispered, I know. I'm sorry. Lila turned away, tears falling freely now. Sorry doesn't fix years. He rose slowly, unsure whether to reach for her or give her space. I don't want to excuse it. I just need you to know the truth. I loved her. I love you. She covered her face, shaking. Then why didn't you fight for us? Because I didn't believe I deserved love, he said quietly. The room went still. Even the rain seemed to pause outside. Lila finally looked at him, eyes red, voice raw. You don't get to just say that and expect me to forgive you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said, voice breaking. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Her tears slowed, anger fading into something like exhaustion. And what if I can't? He took a step closer, his voice trembling. Then I'll still stay. I'll stay until you believe I mean it. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply. Lila sank into a chair, her strength finally giving out. I want to hate you, she whispered, but I can't, because you wouldn't want me to. Michael knelt beside her, resting his hand gently on her arm. Then maybe that's how we start, not with forgetting, but remembering her right. She stared at him for a long time before whispering, I don't know if I can call you Dad again. He nodded slowly. You don't have to. Just let me be here. Taze blurred her vision, but she didn't pull away this time. Okay, she said quietly. He exhaled shakily, eyes glistening with a fragile kind of relief. For the first time, the silence between them didn't hurt. It healed. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and the first light of dawn touched the window pane, turning the tears on both their faces into something that looked like mercy. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, painting soft gold on the floorboards, a contrast to the storm that had raged the night before. Lila sat at the kitchen table, staring absently into her untouched cup of tea. Michael entered quietly, still wearing the same shirt from last night, his eyes weary but softer somehow. Neither spoke at first. The silence between them wasn't the cold kind anymore. It was heavy with unspoken attempt to start again. Finally, Michael said, I was thinking maybe we could visit the shelter you used to stay in. See if they need anything. Lila blinked, surprised. You'd do that. He nodded. If I can help someone else the way I should have helped you, maybe that's a start. Something in her expression shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a fragile bridge being built over the wreckage. They always need food, she murmured. And blankets. The kids there, they get excited over things most people throw away. He smiled faintly. Then we'll bring more than blankets. Within hours, the trunk of Michael's car was filled. Warm clothes, boxes of supplies, toys, and notebooks. As they drove, Lila stared at him in quiet awe. You know, she said softly, I didn't think you were the type to do this. Neither did I, he replied honestly. But maybe it's time I became the kind of man your mother thought I could be. Her lips curved into a small, tentative smile. When they arrived, the shelter buzzed with laughter and chaos, children chasing each other, volunteers serving soup. As soon as Lila stepped inside, several little ones ran to hug her. Lila's back, they cried. Michael froze at the sight. This wasn't the timid, uncertain girl he'd first met. Hey, she was light, alive, needed. A woman approached, mid-40s, kind eyes, worn hands. You must be the father she told us about, she said with a smile. Michael swallowed hard. Something like that. The woman laughed softly. She talked about you often. Said she hoped one day you'd walk through those doors. Lila glanced at him, a shy warmth in her eyes. Guess I wasn't lying. He managed to smile, though his heart ached with both pride and guilt. They spent the afternoon unpacking boxes, handing out toys and clothes. Michael knelt beside a little boy who clung shyly to his leg. "What's your name?" he asked. "Eli," the boy whispered. Michael smiled. "Eli, do you like cars?" The boy nodded, eyes wide. Michael handed him a small toy truck. "It's yours." Eli's face lit up, and for a moment, Michael saw a reflection of himself, the man he could have been all along. As they left the shelter that evening, Lila was quiet, her hands folded in her lap. He glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I saw the way you looked at that boy." He frowned slightly. "How did I look?" "Like a dad," she whispered. The words hit him so softly yet so powerfully that he had to look away. They drove home in silence, the city lights flickering like memories on repeat. When they pulled into the driveway, Lila turned to him and said, "You're changing." He met her eyes. "I'm trying." "I know." The house felt different that night, warmer, lighter. Lila went to her room, and Michael returned to his study, sitting by the window again. The pendant lay open on the desk, glinting in the moonlight. He whispered, "Grace, if you can hear me, thank you for sending her back to me." He didn't expect an answer, but the stillness that followed felt like peace. The next morning, a new rhythm began. Shared breakfasts, small talks, laughter that didn't feel forced. Lila even teased him about his terrible pancakes again. And though some wounds still lingered, they were learning how to live in the same air without it hurting. That evening, they walked through the garden together. The sky was turning gold, the air full of the scent of wet earth and flowers. Lila stopped near the old fountain. "You know," she said, "Mom used to say life is like water. It bends, it breaks, but it always finds a way to keep moving." Michael smiled. "She was right." "She usually was," Lila replied with a soft laugh. They stood quietly, the sunset washing over them in amber hues. Michael turned to her and said, "Thank you, Lila." "For what?" "For giving me a chance to start over." Her eyes softened. "You're giving me one, too." And in that moment, neither of them felt like strangers anymore. They felt like two broken pieces finally remembering how to fit. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Later that night, as Michael watched Lila asleep on the couch, sketchbook fallen open, pencil still in her hand, he smiled. She had drawn them again. This time, there was no umbrella, no rain, just two figures standing under sunlight, holding hands. He whispered, "We made it through the storm, kid." Outside, the moon rose full and soft. Somewhere in the quiet distance, it almost felt like Grace was watching, proud, at peace, and finally home. Weeks passed, and the mansion no longer echoed with emptiness. There was laughter in the hallways, sketches pinned to the refrigerator, the smell of pancakes burning on Saturday mornings, the kind of mistakes that made a house feel human again. Michael found himself looking forward to simple things, Lila humming while she painted, her sarcastic comments about his cooking, the way she left tiny notes on his desk that said, "Don't forget to smile today." It wasn't perfect. Some days were still hard. She still had moments where she'd shut down without warning, memories too heavy to carry. But now, he was there, steady, quiet, waiting. And that was enough. One afternoon, as he sorted through his old office boxes, he found a dusty envelope with the words Project Grace scribbled on it, the old community program his wife had wanted to start before she passed. A foundation for single mothers and abandoned children. He held it for a long time, then walked to Lila's room. She looked up from her sketch pad. "What's that?" He smiled faintly. "Your mother's dream. And maybe our next chapter." They sat together at the dining table, spreading out papers and plans. Lila's eyes lit up as she read her mother's handwriting, ideas for housing, education, emotional support. She wanted to help everyone, she whispered. Michael nodded. "Then let's finish what she started. Together." Tears welled in Lila's eyes. "Do you really mean that?" "With everything I have left," he said. That night, they began drafting plans for the Grace Foundation. It was slow-like, emotional, filled with pauses where they'd laugh or cry or just sit silently, remembering. But it felt right. It felt like purpose. Weeks later, at the opening ceremony, the old shelter kids gathered, volunteers cheered, and reporters asked questions about legacy and love. Michael stood on the small stage, Lila beside him, holding his hand. He cleared his throat, emotion thick in his voice. Years ago, he began, I made mistakes that cost me everything. I spent my life chasing success, not realizing the richest thing I could ever have was love. Today isn't about wealth or redemption. It's about finishing the dream of the woman who believed kindness could change lives, and the daughter who reminded me it still can. Applause filled the air. Lila looked at him with tears shining like sunlight. She'd be proud, she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. We did this for her, but we'll keep it going for everyone else. After the ceremony, they walked through the garden behind the center, freshly built, filled with flowers Grace once loved. Lila picked a white daisy and tucked it into the buttonhole of his suit. Now you look less like a billionaire, she teased. He chuckled. And more like a dad. She smiled softly. Yeah, more like a dad. They walked slowly along the path, laughter mingling with the voices of children playing in the background. It felt like time had folded, past, present, and forgiveness all blending into one golden hour. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you. As the sun dipped low, Lila stopped and looked up at the sky. Do you think she can see us? Michael followed her gaze, the horizon burning with orange light. If there's a place beyond this, she's smiling right now. Lila nodded. Then I hope she knows. We're okay. They sat on a bench, hands intertwined, the air soft and full of distant laughter. Michael glanced at a sketchbook lying open on her lap. The latest drawing showed 3 figures this time, a woman, a man, and a girl standing under a bright sunrise. Who's that in the middle? He asked. Lila smiled. That's her. She finally gets to stand between us again. He couldn't stop the tears this time, but they weren't heavy anymore. They were light, like blessings finally unburdened. As evening melted into starlight, they stayed there quietly. The world didn't owe them peace, but somehow they'd found it anyway, in forgiveness, in love, in carrying forward a legacy of someone who had believed in both. Michael whispered into the fading light, Grace, we did it. We finally found our way home. Lila rested her head on his shoulder. Home, she repeated softly, like a promise kept. And in that silence, between 2 hearts mended by time, loss, and hope, the story of a poor girl and a billionaire became something far greater. A story of love reborn, of faith restored, of a broken family that remembered how to feel whole again. The wind carried the sound of children laughing from the shelter's courtyard, the same laughter Grace once dreamed of hearing. And somewhere above, beneath a heaven-painted gold, it almost felt like she was laughing too,